A warning of an unprecedented terror threat, another diplomatic gaffe by Boris Johnson, and the top author telling kids to keep diaries. You're watching 5 News Tonight. The head of MI6 says Russia and extremists in Syria pose the biggest risks to the UK. Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson is slapped down by the Prime Minister, this time for criticising one of our closest allies. And living on the streets, how it's all too easy to end up sleeping rough.
You could never imagine it. You never wake up in the morning and think, yep, today I'm going to be homeless. It never happens. You never wake up thinking it, and you always think you're the last person it could happen to.
Also tonight, we're discussing the latest health advice for the baby boomer generation. Find out why England's top doctor is telling them to stay active and keep on working. Plus, I'll be talking to award-winning author Jacqueline Wilson about why she wants more young people to keep diaries. Good evening, welcome to 5 News Tonight. I'm Matt Barbett. The new head of Britain's security services says the scale of the terror threat to the UK is unprecedented. Alex Younger has revealed a dozen terrorist plots have been foiled in the past 3 years, but the risks from places like Iraq and Syria remain profound. In his first public speech as head of MI6, he also said cyber attacks are becoming increasingly dangerous. Our political editor Andy Bell was given rare access to MI6.
If this building looks familiar, that's because it's not only the fictional home of James Bond, it's the real HQ of the people who would employ him. The Secret Intelligence Service, SIS, otherwise known as MI6. The head of MI6 is not M, he's known as C, and today, for the first time, he gave a speech in the headquarters to a group of journalists. Now, much of what he told us, I can't repeat, but his message was pretty clear, that MI6 is playing its part in defending Britain in a dangerous world. The MI6 chief said that the scale of the threat from terrorism remained unprecedented. And he said that 12 terrorist plots in the UK had been disrupted since June 2013. Syria is a big concern. The MI6 boss said Russia's military intervention there could increase the danger of international terrorism.
In defining as a terrorist anyone who opposes a brutal regime, they alienate precisely that group that has to be on side if the extremists are to be defeated. Meanwhile, in Aleppo, Russia and the Syria regime seek to make a desert and call it peace.
The terror attacks in France and Belgium have shown how close this threat is to the UK. And he said that after the Brexit vote, it was vital security and intelligence cooperation continued with our European neighbours.
The threats that we faced before these events have not gone away. The joint capabilities we had before exist now. Indeed, they're getting stronger. The need for the deepest cooperation can only grow.
We normally hear virtually nothing out of this building. Today, the MI6 chief clearly wanted to tell the public the threats are real and Britain needs the people who work here. Andy Bell, 5 News.
Well, in the past hour, Russia has claimed it has stopped military operations in the Syrian city of Aleppo. Its foreign minister says the pause is to allow large numbers of civilians to leave the bombarded area. It is now 3 weeks since Russian and Syrian forces began their latest campaign against rebels in the city, causing a new wave of death and destruction. A warning that Peter Lane's report contains images that you could find distressing.
The Syrian army released these images as it claimed to have retaken around 3/4 of rebel-held eastern Aleppo. Its 3-week-long offensive into rebel territory now said to be at a decisive stage. Syria's president himself describing this advance as a huge step towards ending the country's 5-year-long civil war. And feeling the momentum, the country's Minister of Reconciliation said, "Victory in Aleppo is a strategic one. It will change the way for a political settlement." But pictures from the air, again released by the government, show the ghost that Aleppo now is. The city, once described as the beating heart of Syria's commerce and culture, laid bare as a patchwork of ruins. People may talk about the fog of war, but in the murky light after another airstrike, it is clear that the suffering continues for those caught between government forces and the rebels. These pictures posted to social media show the white helmets of volunteer rescuers moving through the rubble. Locals say in the past 3 weeks, 800 people have been killed and 3,000 injured. As the government advance opens up new areas that were under siege, new rescues have been possible. Photos from the Red Cross show some of the 150 people rescued from the ruins of a former old people's home who'd been trapped, surrounded by the bombardment. And they show the reality that for some, the rescue came too late. Peter Lane, 5 News.
Well, a key weapon in the fight against terror is keeping your allies on side. The Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has been given a slap on the wrist, though, by Downing Street after he launched into an extraordinary tirade against one of ours, Saudi Arabia. Let's go back to Andy Bell in Westminster now. And Andy, well, what's this all about?
Well, last week, Matt, Boris Johnson was at a conference in Rome. It was a kind of semi-public event. We don't know whether he realised his remarks would be recorded or not, but they were recorded. They've only just come to light. This is part of what he had to say at that conference about Iran and Saudi Arabia.
You've got the Saudis, the Iran, everybody moving in and puppeteering and playing proxy wars. And it's a tragedy to watch it. We need to have some way of encouraging visionary leadership in that area.
Now, it's one thing to say that about Iran, but quite another to say about Saudi Arabia, which is one of our biggest allies. And in fact, the Prime Minister Theresa May only got back from the Gulf and meeting the Saudi royal family last night. And in fact, this morning, the Prime Minister's official spokesman said that in making those remarks, the Foreign Secretary was not speaking for the government, which, when you think about it, is a pretty extraordinary thing to say from the Prime Minister about her own Foreign Secretary. So tension between Number 10 and Boris Johnson, tension between the Foreign Secretary and a major ally. And just on top of everything, Boris Johnson himself is off to Saudi Arabia this weekend.
OK, good timing. Thanks, Andy. Well, something else for the Prime Minister to think about now, because the government will have to wait until next year to find out whether it has the power to trigger Article 50 and start that process of leaving the European Union. Its challenge in the Supreme Court finished today after 4 days of legal argument. Campaigners believe that all MPs and peers should be consulted first. Judges will deliver their decision in the new year. In one of the more unusual arguments, though, the Welsh Government's lawyer said you didn't need to be a grown-up to understand why the Prime Minister's case is wrong.
This is elementary. A child of 6, with respect, could understand this point. If...
That's very well put.
My Lord, I say a child of 6 could understand this point because if you tell a child it can't go out and play in the garden, but it can play in the house, it has no power, the analogue, to going out in the garden.
Next, hundreds of police officers have been accused of abusing their power to sexually exploit vulnerable victims of crime. A report by inspectors in England and Wales found that more than 400 complaints were made over the course of just 2 years, many by victims of domestic abuse. Less than half of cases were referred to independent investigators. Dominic Reynolds has more details.
PC Stephen Mitchell sexually assaulted women while in uniform and on duty. PC Stephen Walters gave a woman a lift in his patrol car and then assaulted her. PS Paul Banfield assaulted a woman being held in a police cell. Their victims thought they were safe with a policeman. They're just 3 examples of officers abusing their position to sexually exploit. The police watchdog has found allegations running into hundreds.
A protector is turning to abuser, and that for me is a matter of very serious concern. It is serious corruption, it's serious exploitation, it's serious criminality.
In the 2 years to March, there were 436 reported allegations of sexual abuse in England and Wales by police, in which 334 serving officers were accused. And 39% of those allegations involved women who were already victims of domestic abuse. And those are the cruelest crimes, says charity boss Polly. Just try and imagine, she says, you've got an abusive partner and you've plucked up the courage to go to the police.
Everything you've been through has been about a relationship of trust that has turned into a living hell. And then you build a relationship of trust with somebody that you believe is going to sort out the problem. And then what happens? They betray your trust in the worst possible way.
But a former officer wants us to put the 300 alleged abusers in perspective against the 200,000 officers in England and Wales.
This is a very small minority. There's enough knocking of the police right now, and I'd just like to impress upon the public that actually police officers don't want to work with people who are abusing their authority, particularly for sexual favours.
Police leaders admit this is a disease. The watchdog says the answer's in technology, monitoring internet and phone use, spotting patterns of behaviour and intervening before the line is crossed between police and criminal. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News.
Still to come on 5 News tonight. The parents who want an online ban on junk food ads that are aimed at children.
You don't know what they're seeing, so the fact that she does shout out that she wants it makes me aware that there is advertising going on.
And why many children's favourites, the giraffe, are in danger of extinction. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News Tonight. Now, it's well known that Britain has a bit of a weight problem, and health bosses have been trying to tackle it by reducing children's exposure to adverts for junk food. Already there are restrictions on what can be shown on kids' TV, but now the government is going further. From next summer, rules will be tightened for ads online and on social media. As Jessica Omery reports now, some say that's not enough.
So what kind of videos do you like to watch?
Alexandra is 9. Her favourite programme is My Little Pony, but she doesn't watch it on TV, where adverts for sugary, fatty and salty foods have been banned in children's shows for more than a decade. Instead, she watches it online, where those ads regularly pop up. She has to watch them through if she wants My Little Pony to continue.
Maybe toy adverts and chocolate adverts.
And when you see those adverts, what do you normally do?
I go and ask Mummy if I can have them.
Yeah. What does she say?
Mostly no.
Her mum Tracy limits the chocolate and fizzy drinks Alexandra is allowed, but she worries about what her daughter is seeing that she isn't.
When she's watching the TV, I know what she's watching, I'm in control, but not now so much because kids are on their tablets or their phones. They're kind of on their own watching it, so you have to rely on them to be aware, but they get sucked in. They're an impressionable age, so they listen to it and they want it and they ask for it.
The new rules will ban adverts for food and drink deemed unhealthy from targeting children online. It will mean an end to characters like Tony the Tiger and Coco the Monkey, and will apply on all media where children make up a quarter of the audience.
Well, we're certainly going to see a significant reduction in children's exposure to ads for food and soft drinks high in fat, salt or sugar. But no one should expect that this is the silver bullet to deal with the obesity problem we have in the UK.
So not a quick fix, but a step that charities say doesn't go far enough.
We need it to be extended to cover family-based programmes as well. So adults might make up the majority of the audience, but there's still a very high number of children watching. So The X Factor, Britain's Got Talent, there'll be 2 examples.
The new rules come into action in July. Until then, Alexandra is enjoying chocolate in moderation, resisting the ads, and with Mum's permission, having a bite a day until Christmas. Jessica Omery, 5 News.
Now, the other end of the spectrum, if you want a long, healthy and fulfilling life, the advice from England's chief medical officer is to keep working. In a report looking at the health of 50 to 70-year-olds, Dame Sally Davis suggests people should work into their 70s and take up new interests as well in retirement. She says the physical and mental health benefits of being employed or volunteering should not be underestimated. With me now are Claire Chatwell, director of the Bolder Voices Choir, a group of singers aged over 65, and Dan Jones from the Centre for Ageing Better. Good to see you both. Claire, why does singing for the over 65s make a difference to their lives? How does it improve things?
There's nothing like walking out your own front door just to get out of those 4 walls, to see other people, to sing with them. People walk into that room and they walk out feeling better. They breathe, they sing, they laugh together, and they make noise together, and sometimes it's even good noise.
It's even a nice sounding noise. What you're basically saying is whatever it is, you need to have a reason to leave the house.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you do. Yes, absolutely. And we've been very lucky. We've done 5 videos together, and we're doing our 6th, and it's called "I'm Alive,"
Which is a great thing to do, right? Remind yourselves why you're doing it.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. And there was one day when we were rehearsing, and a good friend of mine, who was in his 20s, had just very sadly died. And they were saying, "Oh, I've got these sore." And I said, "Yes, but I'm sorry, you are alive."
Great point, isn't it, Dan? And I think a lot of people, whatever their age, need to remember that it's a privilege to reach whatever age you do, because plenty don't. Having said that, there'll be plenty of other people heading towards their 60s thinking, I'm looking forward to retiring and not working anymore. So Dame Sally is saying, carry on. Is that right?
She is saying carry on. People are going to live for longer, which is a great thing. In general, people are living much longer. But what's really important is that they live healthily for longer. And that does mean staying active, staying connected, staying engaged. And work is a good way of doing that.
And having hobbies as well. The other thing about work is, though, the baby boomer generation is a big bulge in the demographic, and they're sucking up a lot of resources that the younger people perhaps aren't getting to enjoy themselves, like having a job.
There are plenty of people, but on the other hand, the more people that are working, the more people are earning, and the more people that are spending. So having people in jobs makes the economy move around. It makes more jobs. It's not as though there are only so many jobs.
The other thing, Claire, is, I mean, singing is one thing and a great thing for anybody to do, but there is a problem with this particular age group of obesity. A third of them have a weight problem. So they need to be doing more exercise as well, not just belting out the hits.
As I say, just walking out that door, just walking down the street, going to the gym is not necessarily the best way.
Well, walk to the choir then, don't drive there, maybe that's the way to do it. Right?
Nobody I know drives. They're all using their freedom passes. In fact, that's another one of our songs.
A freedom, so you've got a song about freedom passes?
Love that freedom pass.
Okay. I think the other thing to bear in mind when you're singing is it's perhaps a good idea to put the fags away. And I don't know if you smoke, but again, this seems to be a problem with this age group, Dan, that around 18%, I think, of 50 to 70s are still smokers. So that's something to bear in mind.
That is something to bear in mind. So that's what the Chief Medical Officer said. On the other hand, about 34% of 20 to 30-year-olds are smokers. So it does tail off. People do learn, but anybody at any stage of life oughtn't to be smoking if they want to live a long, healthy life. Just
briefly, Claire, I mean, old habits die hard. It's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. Do you agree with that, or is it always possible to start something new?
Do you know, I was running a drama group this morning, and they're all in their 80s. And all of them say, I never thought I would be doing this.
But they are doing it.
And
they probably wish they
are.
tried it sooner.
And they are.
Good advert. Claire, Dan, thank you both very much indeed. Now, they are as unmistakable as they are iconic, a frequent sight in safaris, zoos, and on our TV screens, of course. But conservationists say giraffes are facing what they call a silent extinction. In the last 30 years, numbers have plummeted, largely unnoticed, to fewer than 100,000 in the world. Warren Nettleford has more.
They're distinctive and easily recognisable. As the world's tallest land mammal, giraffes are always able to stand out. But conservationists are now being made to take notice for a very different reason. Giraffes, for the first time, are now vulnerable to extinction.
So the combined impact of human population growth, climate change, poaching has had a devastating effect. But what we need to do is work closely with governments, with NGOs, with international support to apply really good conservation measures.
The figures are alarming and stark. Giraffe numbers have gone from 155,000 in 1985 to 97,000 in 2015. 50% of all the giraffes left in the world now live in southern Africa. In Central and East Africa, giraffe populations are decreasing, and in West Africa, there are now only 450 left of one type of giraffe. Here at London Zoo, where they undertake animal research, they say for too long the plight of giraffes has been ignored.
I think in the media all the time we hear about the threats to rhino, to elephants, even pangolins. Yet giraffe, whilst being an iconic species that everyone associates with Africa, I think people just weren't aware that they're so badly threatened.
We may marvel at their size and their beauty, but hunters target them for medicinal purposes and also for their meat. These are huge and truly show-stopping creatures, and maybe we've taken giraffes for granted for too long, because conservationists are saying if we don't act now, there could be fewer of them in the future. But there is a glimmer of light. In parts of southern Africa, giraffe numbers are increasing. Conservationists want governments to work together so this can be replicated across the continent. Warren Nettleford, 5 News.
Now, earlier this week, we heard from 2 people who are facing a desperate Christmas, living on the streets. Rough sleeping is what most of us associate with homelessness, but there is a hidden side, which in many cases brings surprising stories. Minnie Stevenson has been hearing 2 of them.
I was in a relationship with somebody and obviously it came to a rough end. The only option I had was to go out onto the streets. I didn't really have anywhere that I could go and stay. I slept in a park on a ramp. I only had my jacket, so yeah, it was pretty cold. My first night out on the streets was just, how did this happen? Why am I here? Why is this happening?
This year, Chris became 28 and homeless. When his relationship broke down, he left home with no job and nowhere to go.
You never imagine it. You never wake up in the morning and think, yep, today I'm going to be homeless. It never happens. You never wake up thinking it, and you always think you're the last person that it could happen to in that sense. But this situation showed me that it can happen to anybody.
And how did that make you feel when it happened to you?
Not good. You feel like just ducking into a little hole and just not coming out for a little while.
So you're the youngest by far.
After walking the streets for weeks, Chris found charity Shelter from the Storm. The warehouse in London provides emergency beds for 44 homeless people a night. Since coming here, Chris has qualified as a carpenter and has now moved into his own home.
I found a sense of community in this place. I'd like to think that my future from now is positive, is a bright one. There aren't going to be any more downfalls.
The night shelter has helped over a quarter of the homeless people here get jobs, like 40-year-old Joanna, originally from Poland. When her hours were cut at work, she couldn't afford her rent. The landlord changed the locks. With no family here, she now lives at the shelter and gets up at 5 a.m. every day to work in a sandwich shop.
What do you think people think when they think of a homeless person?
They think usually the homeless people are alcoholics and have problems with drugs, and they are not working.
Joanna is now saving for a deposit and hopes her dream of having her own place isn't too far away, while Chris volunteers to help other homeless people.
And how are you feeling now?
Brilliant. I'm happy. I'm brilliant. At the end of the day, I said I come back every single day that I come back. And if I can do something, I can. And if I can't, I'm just here to be nice and smile and be pretty.
The people I spoke to here may have lost everything, but they haven't lost hope. While they may be homeless, for now, this is home. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
Now, how many of you keep a diary? More importantly, how many of your children or grandchildren keep one? New research has found that school kids who write a diary regularly do better than their classmates. In fact, according to the National Literacy Trust, pupils who keep a diary are twice as likely to write above the expected level for their age. But earlier on, I spoke to award-winning author Jacqueline Wilson about this. She's probably best known for her Tracy Beaker books and the TV show as well, which include parts of the character's diary. Well, Jacqueline began by telling me about her own diaries.
I kept a diary throughout my childhood. I started when I was about 7 with the Let's Schoolgirl diary and just wrote about a couple of sentences. By the time I was 13 or so, I'd write page after page. I mean, I adored the Diary of Anne Frank and wept over it. And even the fiction books I liked, I was particularly fond of I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith, which is written in diary form. So I felt diaries were really made for me, and I just poured my heart out in them. But I would suggest that any other young person that does likewise find a good hiding place.
Have you found your diaries from then, and do you read them back?
I have a few of them still. They give me shivers of embarrassment, but it's interesting to see the bits of that long ago girl that are still deep buried in me. And other times it's as if this diary writer is a complete stranger. But because I write for young people, it does help me get back into that feeling of knowing that one day you're so excited and happy and bouncy, and then the very next day you're in the depths of despair. You know, you catch hold of that kind of feeling. And although times change and interests have changed, I think being a young person is exactly the same.
And I'd hazard a guess that it's helped inform you as an author, and a very successful one, that teenagers, younger children now who read your books. And what would you say to them if they are enjoying reading your books, enjoying your characters, but don't keep diaries themselves?
Well, generally, particularly when they say to me, I want to be rich and famous like you, I say, well, it does you a good thing if you actually start to write a diary when you're young, because so many people want to write. So many people might actually have the talent to do it, but they don't have the determination to every day start writing, because I think this whole thing of inspiration is a myth.
And it seems, if we look at the figures, that it's more of a girly thing, much more than a boyish thing. Why do you think that is? And what would you say to boys who...
I think girls are more in touch with their emotions, but I know the National Literacy Trust, in their campaign to get young people to write diaries because it increases fluency and organises your thoughts and all this sort of thing. But they've suggested boys might like to report on a special sports match, something like that. I don't think it really matters what sort of things you write. It's just being able to express yourself. And I think particularly nowadays, when everybody shares so much on social media, the whole point of a diary is it's private. It's just for you. So you can be your real self, not the self that you would rather like to be.
Do you finally, Jacqueline, still keep a diary, or are the books, the many books you've written, some sort of reminder of how you were feeling at those times?
Well, certainly many of my books are in diary form, but I do try to keep a diary myself. I have to say, I have to be totally honest, every January I have a brand new diary and I'm so keen and enthusiastic. Ask me how I feel about it in March and I'm wavering, and I don't always get beyond the summer. The spirit is willing, the hand is weak.
OK, got to stick at it. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely to see you again.
And you too, thank you.
The fabulous Jacqueline Wilson there. That is just about it from me for now. Claire Nasir will be here with the weekend weather next, and the Fridays as well. And Danny Sinha has updates throughout the evening. I'll be here again at 5 tomorrow, and then again at 6:30 as well. For now, thanks for your company. See you then. Bye-bye.